Hello, I hope you are doing well. In this video, you are going to be learning how to texture and render cars using Keyshot. This will be a beginner's tutorial, so I will go over how you can navigate your way around Keyshot and how to use different materials. And I'll be also covering how you can load your car up into a background and how you can render it. Right, so first thing is first that we need to import our model into Keyshot, and as you can see that I've already imported my model into Keyshot. If you look at the center screen, this is called as the viewport, and inside of it is my model. And to import your models in Keyshot, you can either press this import button down here, or you can go into File, Import, and then select your model from there. Right, so once your model has imported, we can see that it has no textures, right? So we want to add some textures to it, right? So before that, I'd like to tell you about the menus of Keyshot. There are two main menus that you use when working with Keyshot. The first one is the library menu. You can turn it on from the library button down here, and it will pop up on the left side of your screen where you can drag in the different materials, and Keyshot comes preloaded with different kinds of materials from the get-go, so you can just select a material and then just drag and drop it into your model. Right, also in the materials tab you can find the textures, you can also find different environments and models and other things, right? And the next tab and the next menu that you use mainly is the project menu, which you can turn on from the same bottom row over here. So once you click on the project button, it will pop up on the right side of your screen, and over here you can find the scene tab where you can control your model. So if I go into position, I can move it with the move tool, I can scale it, and I can also rotate and control it basically. The next tab is the materials tab. So once I drag in a material onto my model, I can tweak it further from this tab, right? The next tab is the environment tab. Over here you can change the environment that your model is in, as well as you can transform it, so you can change its size, you can change its height, you can rotate it, and also you can do other stuff with it as well, like adding more lights to your HDRI, and as well as changing the brightness and all that. The next tab is the lighting tab. The lighting tab is where you control, you guessed it, the lighting. So you can increase the shadow quality. So if you see, our model has shadows in it, so we can increase their quality. We can also work with general lighting, and we can increase ray bounces, we can change the render technique. We'll go over these more in depth later on, but this is just a basic overview of the lighting tab. The next tab is the camera tab. Over here you can work with your cameras, you can add in new cameras, right, and you can switch between them. Also you can change their position and orientation with this slider, with all these sliders over here. And if you scroll down, you can also change the focal length of your camera, as well as adding depth of field. The next tab and the final tab is the image tab. Over here you can change the look of your image before rendering it. So what I mean by that is you can adjust the exposure, the gamma, you can also turn on denoiser, bloom, and also tone map your image. So if you go into photographic mode, you can tone map it by changing the exposure, white balance, contrast, the curve, and all these things. Right, so this is just a quick overview of the project panel in Keyshot. If my Keyshot may look a bit different to yours, it may be because that I have dark mode on, and you can turn your dark mode on by going into Edit, Preferences, and changing the theme from light to dark, right? So once you have that set, everything will turn into dark mode. Right, so moving on to the textures, right? So first thing is first, I would like to change the environment that my model is in. You can see that this model has loaded up in the default environment, and I would like to change this, right? So in order to do that, we first need to go into the environment tab and head over to the environment tab in the library panel as well, right? Over here you can see that Keyshot comes preloaded with different HDRIs, which are basically the image maps that have the lighting information, and you can just drag and drop them into this box. You can download these from the cloud library, as well as head over to a website called Polyhaven. It's a free website, and you can go into the HDRIs section and you can find all these free HDRIs and you can download them. You can also select their resolution and download them and drag them into your environment. So back on Keyshot, we are going to select this Harbor Evening HDRI and just drag it into our environment. You can see that the environment on our model has changed, in our viewport has changed, but there are a few things I would like to change. First thing is the scale of this environment. You can see that it's way too big. So if we go into settings and under transform the size, we would like to change this. But before we do that, I want to change the unit of measurement from centimeter to meter. To do that, we're going to edit, set scene units, and select meter. This will pop up asking you that whether you would like to just keep the scene as is and just change the unit of measurement, or would you like to scale your scene to turn, like as it says, 1 centimeter into 1 meter, right? So for this scenario, we are just going to keep the scene as is and just change the unit of measurement. So we're going to keep scene size and press OK. You can see that now it has turned into meters. We are going to bring this down to 10 meters, and now you can see our environment has gone smaller. Now we are going to scroll down, and I would like to add in a ground. So you can see that our model is floating, or it looks like it's floating inside of the sphere. So I would like to turn this into a dome and flatten the ground. To do that, I just scroll down to ground in the same settings panel and press flatten ground. Now my ground is flat. Right. So the next thing is adding in the textures, right? So we have loaded in this environment because it has realistic enough lighting so that when we load in our models, we can see how they would act and behave under realistic lighting conditions, and this process is called as look depth. So basically you add in your materials and you see how they are in real life lighting conditions, and then you can tweak them accordingly. Right. So going back to materials, the materials tab in the library section, we can start by adding in our paint to the car. So Keyshot comes preloaded with a special type of material called Exalta paint. These paints are basically pre-calibrated to mimic car paints, and they are really well made because they are so well made that I use them in my renders as well. But you can find different shades that are preloaded, that are different colors, sorry, that are preloaded in Keyshot. But also you can go into the cloud library and download different colors. As you can see in my download section, I have different colors. So you can also go into the paint section and you can also use metallic paints, and these are fine as well, but I would suggest that you avoid using paint gloss for your car paint because in my opinion this gloss paint looks very flat doesn't have a lot of depth, and it makes your model look like it has been spray painted, right? So instead of using gloss paint, I would suggest either using metallic paint, or your best bet will be using Axalta paint, which we'll be doing in this scenario. We'll be adding in this gray metallic paint. Right. Now the next thing that we would like to do is texture the headlights. So if we scroll into the headlights, we will, before beginning to texture the headlights, I want to show you that I have loaded up a program called PureRef with reference images of our model in real life. So the GTR that we're working with, I have added in pictures of its headlight, of its tail light, and also other angles of it. So this is for gathering reference images, so you can go back and forth and check your materials and make sure that they are looking right or they are looking correct. So this program is free, and you can just copy and paste images into it for reference, right? So we are going to use this image as a reference of the headlight. So going back to Keyshot, we are going to scroll to glass, and we are going to select glass basic. Just drag this into our model, right? Now we are going to select the model with left click or right click it and press hide part. We want to see what's behind the glass. Now you can see that there is another object behind the front glass that also has taken up the same material as the object in front, and that is because both of the objects are linked. So what that means is that whatever happens to the material on the object up front will be copied over to the object in the back, or any object that has linked material. Right. So we are going to hide this glass part as well, and we are going to work on the light housing, right? So if we go back to our reference, you can see that our light housing has this chrome-like finish, right? So we are going to replicate that by going into paint and adding in a metallic paint, right? So now to edit our material, because this has a blue shade to it and we want to tweak it to make it look like a chrome-like material, we are going to select the model, double left click, and this panel will pop up on the right side. So over here you can tweak the materials, and also you can change their colors and all their properties, right? So for base color, we are going to reduce the saturation and we are going to turn down the value, right? The next thing is the metal color. We are going to reduce the saturation and we are going to turn the value up to 100, right? So now we are going to use the metal coverage slider, which basically determines the metallicness of your paint. So if I set it to 0, it's going to turn to black because there is no metallicness in our paint. But if I turn this to 1, right, you can see that our object has this metallic finish to it. Now we would like to get rid of the roughness that you see on our object. So to do that, we go into the metal roughness slider and we turn this to 0, right? So now you can see that our object has turned into this chrome-like material. But you can see that our object is very shiny and we would like to add a bit of roughness, and we can do that by going to clear coat roughness and slightly sliding this slider up to like 0.0186, so like very slightly or even lower, just so that in your renderings it doesn't look very mirror-like. So these are just like minor things that you have to take care of when you are working with materials. The next step is the lens, the headlight lens. We are going back to our glass material and add in a glass solid material, right? Now we're going to hide this part and zoom in. Right. Now you can see that we have to texture our headlight fixture, so the front of it and also the rear base of it. So that usually is a hard shiny plastic or just a black material would work for it, right? So you can see we are not gonna go with a very detailed close-up shot of our model, so these little minute details won't matter as much unless you are doing in zoomed in renders. Then you need to spend more time working on the materials, right? So the next thing is the side indicator light. We are going to glass and drag in a orange glass material. If we go back to our reference image, you can see that it is a bit more saturated on the actual car. So we are going to double left click on it and turn the slider down to be a little bit more red, right? So with that out of the way, we are going to right click and press show all parts. Now you can see that we can't really see what's behind the glass in our headlights, and in order to fix that, we need to go into the lighting tab, and under general lighting, the ray bounces slider, we are going to turn this up to 22, and you can see that now it calculates the reflections more, and we can sort of see what's behind the glass, right? So double click, if we go back to our scene and we double click on this glass material up front, we can change its value to 100%, and you can see that now we can clearly see what's behind the glass as well as see the reflections on the glass itself, right? So the next thing is that we are going to work on the front part of the grille. So if we go back to our reference image, we can see that the grille is just a black plastic material. So we are just going to go to plastic and drag in a hard shiny plastic material, right? So that would be alright, and now we have to change this material over here, right? So you can see that it has copied over the same shiny plastic from our grille into here, right? So we would like to unlink this and change it into a solid black. To do that, to unlink materials, we are going to select the model. You can see the outline, the yellow orange outline. We are going to right click on it and press unlink material. Now we can change its properties without affecting our grille material. So we are going to change the material type from plastic to diffuse and bring this down to 5%. Bring the value down to 5%, right? With that out of the way, the next thing is adding in the glass for the windows. So going back to our glass tab, we are going to add in the same basic glass material. Now, I would like to add tint to the side windows of the car, but not to the front windscreen. Alright, so to do that, we are going to select our side windows, you can see, but just by left clicking on them, we are going to right click, unlink the material, double click on it, and we are going to reduce its value down to 50%. So you can see that now our side windows are tinted. Now I'd like to repeat this. I'd like to add the same material to the back window. To do that, as you can see, our model is selected. I'm going to hold shift, left click, and now our material is copied. So I'm going to select the rear window, right click, and press unlink material. Now if I press Ctrl V, you can see that our material has been pasted over. Right, so our windscreen is still without a tint, but our side and back windows have the tint. Right, so the next thing I would like to do is I want to texture the interior. So we are going to left click on the model, of the windscreen, and we are going to press hide part. Now that our part is hidden, we are going to texture it, but you can see that it takes a while to load up for the interior, and that is because it's calculating all the light bounces that are happening from the side windows. So we can turn off the shadows by clicking on performance mode, and you can see that our materials look much simpler and we can texture them easily. So if we go into cloth and leather and drag this cloth material into our model, you can see that it covers basically almost all of the bits and objects, all of the objects inside the material, inside the car. But since we aren't going for an interior render, this will be fine, because we'll only see a silhouette of the interior, right? So if you're doing an interior shot, then you can obviously spend more time working on the materials, as well as so you can spend more time working on the materials, right? So right click, show all parts, and now we can turn off performance mode, right? So now that our interior has been textured, we can turn performance mode off. Now if we head back to the rear, I would like to add in a glass material for the tail lights, right? And now our tail lights have been textured. If we hide this part, right, we can see that the textures from the front have been copied over to the rear, so we don't have to do it again. They are linked. So show all parts. If you go back to our reference images, you can see that our light in the center has this slight orange tint to it, or slight orange hue to it. That's because the bulb behind this glass is orange in color, so we can change the color of our glass by hiding these materials. So hide part, and selecting our bulb, right click on it, press unlink material, double click on it, and we can add in some saturation and make it orange, right? So now that our glass is orange, we can see that it has that orange look to it, right? I just want to make sure that I unlink the material. I did, yeah. So I just edited the glass and changed its color, right? So now the next thing is we are going to texture the side mirrors, right? So for the side mirrors, we are going to use the same material as the front headlights, the chrome-like material, because in Keyshot, it's better that if you are texturing a material that looks like a reflective piece of glass, it's better that you use a chrome-like material instead of dragging in a glass material, because in real life you would obviously add in it will obviously be a glass piece, but in Keyshot it's better that we use a reflective chrome-like material. So we are going to hide our model, right, and we are going to double click on our headlight chrome, and we are going to save it as headlight chrome, right? So now that our headlight chrome material, this menu pops up, we can save it as a separate material, right? So now that our material is saved, we can head back to our side mirrors and we can search for our headlight chrome material. You can see that I have many different headlight chrome materials, and that's because I've tried recording this tutorial many times. And yeah, so we're just gonna drag this material to our side mirrors, double click on it, or before that we are going to unlink it so that it doesn't copy or it doesn't change the properties of the glass of the chrome up front. and we are going to slide down the roughness of it, right? So now with that out of the way, the next thing is that we are going to add in the textures for this badge. So if we go back to our reference images, we can see that I have loaded up this image of the badges, and the GT badge is a polished chrome with a dark red G and a polished chrome T. Right, so going back, we can use the same chrome-like texture and just drag it into our badge, unlink it, and add in a little bit more roughness. Right, and with that looks alright. And now if we go back to our downloads, I can see I'm going to add a dark red color to the G. Right, so now that our side badge has been textured, the next thing is texturing the wheels, right? So for the wheels, they are pretty much the same as adding in the paint for the car, because they are also painted. So you can add in an Exalta paint to your wheels, or in this scenario we can go with adding in a metallic paint. Right, so dragging in a metallic paint, and we are going to change it up a bit. Right, so we are going to increase its value slightly, and we are going to drop its metal color while also adding in a bit of saturation. Right, so something like that. If we go back to our reference images, we can see that this is much lighter in color, so we are going to increase its saturation or increase its value, and we are going to add in a slight yellow tint to it. Right, now that that is out of the way, we are going to work on the tire material. So if we click on our tire material, we can right click on it and press show only. So what this does, it will show only the tire object, and it will hide everything else. So now if you notice that when I'm rotating my camera, that it's still pivoting around the it still has the car as the pivot point of it. So we want to change that to be the pivot point of this tire, right? So we are going to select the model, right click on it, and press set camera target. Now our wheel is the camera target, or our tire is the camera target. I keep calling it a wheel, it's a tire, but anyways. Right, so what I want to do with this model is that I want to split it in half, right? So what that means is that I want this face to be a separate object, and I want the center part to be a separate object. And to do that, I'm going to left click and select the model, and I'm going to right click and press split object surfaces. Right, so once our menu loads up, right, you will see that we can see the faces on our model. Right, so if I click on one of these faces, you can see that everything within the 45-degree angle will get selected, right? So I just want to select the face, right? And to do that, I am going to reduce the angle down to somewhere like 14 degrees. And now if I press on it again, you can see that it only selects the front face of it. And now if I want to select this little circle that is next to it, I can just hold down shift and draw a box. Right, it will draw a box, it will box select, and if I let go of shift, if I let go of left mouse button and then let go of shift, we can see that this has also been added to the selection. Right. So now that we have selected these faces, we are going to press split surface, and our face of the tire is now a separate object, as you can see. we can hide it. So now if we press apply, we can see that our object is in 2 separate pieces. Now for the center part of the tire, I would like to add in tire materials. So if we search up rubber in our materials panel, we can just drag and drop this material in. And I would like to add in a dirt map to the center of the tire, because if you go back to our reference image, we can see that the tire obviously has dirt around the center part, because that's the part that rolls around, so it gets dirty, and then it falls off to the center where you can see the rubber part of the tire. Right. To replicate that in Keyshot, I am going to add in a dirt map, right? So if I double left click on my rubber material, you can see that we have a box called material graph, right? If I click on it, we are going to see that our material graph has opened up. Over here we can add different materials, and they will work like nodes. They are set up like nodes, and we can add in different materials. So right click to add in a new material, go into materials. You can also add in textures, you can also add animation nodes and all that, but we are going to materials, plastic, and now you can see that we have added in a plastic material. We are going to take this circle on the right, drag it out, and plug it into our label of our object, right? So you can see that now our tire has this plastic material on top of it. It has overridden the surface material that was the rubber. Right, so now I would like to add in a dirt map. So going back to the website that I mentioned before, Polyhaven, they also have textures, and you can download different textures for free, and I've already downloaded this white plastic texture, and I am going to select these 4 maps: the diffuse map, the normal map, the roughness map, and the specular map. So I'll select these and I'll drag them over to my material graph. Right, now I am going to plug the diffuse into the diffuse section, and I am going to adjust it. Right, now if we left click on our diffuse map and press C, you can see that it shows the map in full color, without being affected by the shadows or the reflections or the other maps. So it just shows it as a image, right? So what I want to do is I want to adjust this material to match, to line up with the wheel. So if I press center on part and then change the mapping type from box to cylinder, we can see that now our texture is cylindrical. Now if I press move texture and I scale this down, right, so that it matches up with our wheel, right? So I'll apply this transformation, right, and I'll press C again. Right, so now that you can see that our texture has been applied, we are going to add in the different maps. So we are going to add in a bump map. So we are going to take the normal map and plug it into the bump. We are going to take the roughness map and plug it into the roughness, and we are going to take the specular map and plug it into the specular. Right, so you can see that now it looks alright, but our entire tire is in this material. So what I want to do is I just want to have the center part, if you see in the reference image, just the center part of it, and then have it fall off to be the rubber. So to do that, we are going to go back to our node graph, material graph. We are going to go into textures, or we are going to right click, go into textures, color gradient, and we are going to plug this into the opacity of our model, of our material, of our material. And if I click on the color gradient and then press C, you can see that our gradient has, you can see our gradient, right? So now I would like to adjust it so that it falls off. Right, so we have this slider over here, and whatever is in black will be the surface material, which in our case is the rubber material, and whatever is in white will be the dirt material. Right, so I'm going to add in another stop in the center, and I'm going to drag this to the right, and I'm going to change its color from white to black. Right, now it's all a matter of adjusting our dirt map to be in the center and have it fall off towards the edges. Now if we press C, you can see that our dirt starts to fall off towards the center. Right, next thing is I would like to change the color of this dirt because it's very bright, it's very vibrant. I would if we go back to our reference image, we can see that it's going to tone it down a bit. Right, so to do that, we are just going to click on this little squiggly line. Right, and once we see the dotted box, we are going to right click, go on utilities, and press color adjust. And this node will be added in between the diffuse and the plastic material. Now we can adjust its contrast as well as its value, and we can bring it down to something that looks like this, right? So with that out of the way, now we have to move on to texturing the sideball, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to press hold shift, copy this material, and then paste it to the center part as well. Right, so double click, or before double clicking, we are going to left click on it, unlink it, and then double click and open the material graph. What we're going to do now is delete the dirt map from this part because we don't need the dirt map, and we are going to add in a sideball texture. If you look at our sidewall of this image, you can see that it has this text on it. So I have downloaded this texture of a sidewall, and I'm going to drag this into the material graph. Now I want to plug this into my bump node of the plastic material, but you can see that our bump node is already been taken by the noise texture. So what I can do is click on this little squiggly line, and once we see the little box pop up, right click and utilities, bump add. So now we can add in another bump map to the same material. So I'm going to drag this into bump 2, and if I press C, we have to align it, right? So I'll just change center on from model to part, right? So now our texture is aligned. Now I'm going to scale this up slightly, and I'm also going to flip it horizontally because it's mirrored, right? So now if I press C again, we can see that we have added in a bump texture to the front. Now I'm going to click on bump add, go into textures, select bump number 2, and change its strength bump height down to somewhere around 0.24, right? And we can see that now our tire has the sidewall texture. Obviously you can add in the roughness and also the specularity of, you can change it and by using the same methods, so you get a better result, but for this tutorial this will work fine, right? Now if we right click and press show all parts, we can see that our tire and wheel are textured. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy over, I'm going to repeat these steps over on the other 3 wheels, and I'll get back once they are done. Right, so now that our tires have been textured, it's time to move on to the rotors. The rotors, if we go to our reference images, we can see that it's basically a reflective material, but it has these lines on it which are caused by the calipers, right? So if we go back to Keyshot, select our rotor and then press show only. I would like to separate this hub from the rotor, so just press split object and hold shift, box select this hub and split surface. Now this hub is a different color and we are going to paint it black. Right, now we have to texture the rotor. So we can use a metallic paint color and tweak it a little bit, so we can get rid of the saturation, reduce the value, as well as reduce the metal color, and we can add in some roughness to it. Right, now to add in it the little lines that you see, the little circular lines, we are going to go to the textures and we are going to search for radial, right? If we open up the material graph, right, and have it to the side, going back to the textures, we can see this brushed radial texture. We're going to select it and drag it into our material graph. I'm going to pull this out and plug it into our bump node. I'm going to press C and center it on the part, right? If I press C again, now you can see that our radial texture is on the center of our model. Now I would like to reduce the height of this bump map by going into textures and reducing it down to somewhere around 0.19, right? That looks alright. Now if we right click and show all parts, we can see that our brake rotors have been textured as well. Right, so now I am going to copy these materials over onto the back and the side, right, and our model is almost done being textured, right? So there are a few things I would like to change. This brake caliper copied over the plastic paint or the plastic material, so I'll just change it into metallic black, and also these lug nuts, and do the same step on the other side, right? And our model is done being textured, right? Now I want to change the environment to something different, right? So I've gone ahead back in Polyheaven and I downloaded this environment called Shudu Lake. So we are just going to drag this into our environment tab, and now we can see that our environment has changed, right? So what I would like to do now is that I'd like to turn the wheels of the car, right? So in order to do that, first we have to group the wheels and make a separate group, and then we can turn them together, right? So if I press Ctrl Alt and 4 on the number row on top, we can see that it goes into standard view. So if you press Ctrl Alt 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can see that it scrolls through the standard views, right? So in order to box select, what I'll do is that I'll hold shift and I'll draw this box, and I'll make sure that the wheel and the tires are inside this box. If I let go of left mouse button and then shift, you can see that our wheels and tires have been selected. Now I want to add this to a different group, so I'm going to right click over here on the side and press add to group. Now I'm going to make a new group called front left, right? And if we hide our model, if we hide our car model, you can see that this badge has also copied over. So I'll hold shift, make another box, select this badge, and send it back to the root node, right? Now that we can hide that as well, and now I want to make another group for the tire of the wheel, another group for the wheel on the right. So I'll hold shift, I'll make another box, and I'll let go of left mouse button, and we can see that the wheel on the right is selected. So we're going to right click, add to group, and make another group called front right. So now you can see that our wheels are in two separate groups and we can turn them. So to do that, we are going to press front left, and we are going to use the move tool. Also, a shortcut for the move tool is Control D, and it opens up the move tool. And if we hold shift and select the y-axis, which is the green circle, and hover over it, and you will see that it turns green and the other colors fade away. If I hold shift and I drag this down, you can see that our wheel rotates in 15-degree increments, right? So I want to turn this 15 degrees, and I want to turn the other wheel 15 degrees as well, right? And now that our wheels have turned, we can unhide the rest of the model. And now it's time to hide the library, and it's time to just work on our framing. So go into the camera settings, camera tab, scroll to the position and orientation tab, and underneath grid you can select thirds. So now it overlays a grid layout on your screen, on your viewport, and you can adjust your camera to it, right? And you can also mess with the focal length. We are going to keep it at 35 millimeters, and that looks all right? So the next thing is the image tab. You can, as I mentioned before, that you can add in a new image style, go into change it from basic to photographic, and you can change its look by changing in the contrast, the exposure, the white balance, the contrast. Also, you can change the contrast, the curve of the contrast, so you can make a linear curve, a low contrast curve, or a high contrast curve, as well as you can also change the curve manually by adjusting the shadows, the midtones, the highlights, and all that. You can also change the saturation as well as the vibrance, and we are going to use the denoise filter. So the denoise filter, it gets rid of the noise in your renders as well as it makes it smoother. So we want to, so 1 is the maximum and 0 is none, right? So you have to select a value that isn't too much or isn't too less, right? So you have to find the sweet spot, and usually I stick between 0.4 and 0.8 depending on my seat, right? So we are going to keep it around 0.7 for this, and the firefly filter is what gets rid of the little blotches of light that you get in your renders. If you have many lights pointing towards your model, you can get little ugly blotches of light. So the firefly filter gets rid of that. The next thing is bloom. You can add in bloom, right? I usually like to add bloom in my images, as well as you can add in vignette, right? And also chromatic aberration, which basically fringes the sides of your image, and it gives it a motion blur look, right? So it is a neat trick that if you turn down the saturation of the chromatic aberration, it gives that motion blur of like you're running towards your object, right? I usually have this off, and yeah, that's the image tab, right? So now we have to render our image. So if I press pause and I hit render, we can see that this menu pops up. I can give our file a name. I can select the folder I'd like to render it in, and also I can select the format that it saves in. So I can select PNG, JPEG, EXR, TIFF, PSD. I can also change the resolution, as well as add in different render passes. These are used for post-processing, so you can add in different elements and then adjust them later on. The next thing is the options. Over here you can select the sample rate. Usually I keep mine between 15 to 250 samples. I don't go above, I don't go under, because the more samples you add in, the more time it takes to render, and the less samples you have, the worse your image is going to look. So it's all about finding the sweet spot for your scene, and once you find that, you can just render your images. You have to experiment, but you have to find the sweet spot. And you can also use the denoise filter to cut down on sample rate, and also get a good looking image. Right, so the next thing is you can add your renders to a queue, so you can add in different camera angles and add them to a queue and then process it. Right, and then once you are done, once everything is set, you can we can hit render, and it will render out the image and we can save it. Right, so this was a deep dive into Keyshot. I hope you learned something. If you did, please give this video a like. Also, I'd appreciate it if you can subscribe. I'll make more of these tutorials in the future, and this was a tutorial that had been requested a lot, and I figured I'll make one in depth. And yeah, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below and I'll answer them for you, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye bye.